Welcome to Cycle Breakers and Moneymakers, a podcast for women of color and first gen who are breaking generational cycles and glass ceilings by going places no one before them has ever gone. I'm your host, leadership coach, and eldest daughter of immigrants, Mariela Delamora. I left a 16-year marketing career to create a multiple six-figure-a-year coaching business as a single mom. Each week, you'll learn how to build unshakable self-trust, become in demand, lead with confidence, and make more money by being more of who you are. All right, y'all. So this week's episode, part 2 of the six-figure self-trust series, so this is part 2 of 3, is going to be a little more vulnerable because I am going to be sharing the story of why for the first 30 years of my life, I was the last person on earth I would ever trust. This is why trusting myself so fiercely and deeply now is what absolutely changed my life and why I value the skill of self-trust and why I'm honestly the best person to teach it. Because of my background, you're going to understand when I tell you the story. I was not conditioned to trust myself. And for the first 30 years of my life, I literally experienced gaslighting and emotional abuse and all the things. Yet I stand here and I have made almost $1 million as a single mom with a business that doesn't look like anyone else's, having been on 30 podcasts without pitching. I've had dozens of speaking engagements without pitching. I have lived a past life where I quit my job and I solo traveled and I left behind like all of the things that you would think that a daughter of immigrants would want. I walked away from marriages that weren't healthy for me. There were just so many things that required like fiercely having my own back and choosing myself and learning how to trust myself. And like I said, this is why now I'm just like, who better to teach self-trust than somebody who really had to go through the ringer for decades and learn how to build it within myself for the first time. And I have further developed the skill of self-trust through my business because business really requires that of you. All of this is going to explain how I took the things that I've learned in my life to build the skill of self-trust, to have a year where I made more money in the last 2 months than I did in the first 10 months, and how that pattern in itself has repeated within my business when I've lost self-trust and then regained it, how it's shown up with my clients as well. And the areas that self-trust shows up when you lose it and then when you regain it, it affects these common areas of your business. So we're going to talk today. Number 1, again, I'm going to tell you the story, my own self-trust story, gaslighting story, all the things of how I was the last person. I went from being the last person on earth I would ever trust to being someone that I trust myself more than anything, how that changes lives, how I rebuilt my self-trust using a system that I now use in my business. And I'll talk to you about that, how I used that system in 2021, the year that I made $80K in the last 2 months after making $70K in the first 10, and what that actually looks like in real time. And then how those systems that I now teach my clients that I learned, honestly, in the depths of my own trauma, and really the skill that I have protected and built so fiercely that I've been able to help my clients tap back into, has allowed them to have the results that they've had. So my clients in reclamation, for example, many of them, if you look at the sales page, and if you look at the stories that I shared in the last launch, there's been a lot of doubling and tripling. So either doubling the amount of money that they've made or tripling, or hitting the same number in half the time. There's been a lot of collapsed timelines, and they didn't overhaul anything because you don't have time to overhaul to get that sort of result. Like it really is a lot of doing less, raising your identity and your self-belief and self-trust, and then lowering the things in the action line and really just like reducing your resistance. There's so much of that that's necessary. That actually unlocks a level of growth. And then after that, after you stabilize that self-trust level of growth, there's more growth beyond that. That's when we're going to look at like, okay, let's look at your messaging. Let's look at your strategy. Let's look at, are there things we want to tweak? But unlocking self-trust is almost just like putting down a heavy ass backpack that you've been carrying and wondering why you're so exhausted in your business, why your brain is so busy, why you're just doubting yourself. That like building self-trust is like putting down this gigantic heavy backpack. You're taking the same steps, but they feel significantly easier. So for the first 30 years of my life, I was the last person I would ever trust because I grew up being invalidated, gaslit, as many daughters of immigrants are. We don't really necessarily think that, but if you grew up with essentially kind of being told you're exaggerating, you're crazy, I don't know what you're talking about, or just being raised to listen to authority, listen to your parents, listen to other people, and silence yourself, you were not raised to trust yourself at all. You were raised to outsource your self-trust to figures of authority, your parents, teachers, all the things. It wasn't something that I actively thought about, but I think this is why so many daughters of immigrants struggle with like people pleasing and perfectionism and making decisions and trusting themselves, because so much of it has been outsourced and we've been taught to outsource it. And when I look back, it's like, obviously your parents always do the best that they can. They think that they're shaping you and correcting you and whatever. But I think what happened was, because I grew up in such a controlling household, and I feel like I tried so hard to be the good daughter. I'm the eldest. I have two little sisters. I tried so hard to be the good daughter that got the good grades, that would do all her chores, that would do her homework. I never asked for help with anything, helped with my little sisters, that I didn't even want praise. Obviously, I did want praise, but I just would work to just not be criticized or told that I did something wrong. And so I think in all of that, it was just desperately outsourcing it to somebody tell me that I'm doing a good job. And I just can see this now as an adult, the experience, I'd say, for many daughters of immigrants is one where we grow up not ever receiving validation. And validation can take the form of great job, or I see you tried so hard, or, oh, I see what you did there, or, oh, I can see where you're coming from, or, oh, yeah, that must have been difficult for you, or, oh, I see where you're coming from. Just like anything relating. And I think about this now as a mom, because my daughter is 7, how I validate her all the time. Like, I probably validate her like a dozen times a day. It shows up in so many forms. She might wake up in the morning and say she had a scary dream or something like that. Or it's just like, oh, she had this dream. And then I'm like, oh, tell me about it. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Instead of like, don't be scared, or that's nothing. Like, there's so many different opportunities to connect with your child and to tell them like what you're feeling makes sense. What that happened made sense. That all makes sense. If you weren't told that, and many of us didn't. And it's not because our parents like knew that they were intentionally withholding something. It's just that I think many of us were raised with a corrective form of parenting, and they also didn't receive it. And so what happened was, the very first boyfriend that I had at 18, it was a really not good relationship. He was lying and cheating and gaslighting and manipulative and controlling, and that just felt familiar. Like, you end up, if you don't solve something in your household, you end up going and dating somebody that reminds you of what you grew up with. And I think I just learned that I had to earn love, and that I really couldn't trust myself, and that I was with other people that could tell me if I was being reasonable. And so I was in that relationship for 13 years. We got married after 10. And I just remember being in this marriage and never once, not a single time ever, hearing, oh, yeah, that makes sense, or I'm sorry, or, oh, I can see why that hurt you. Not a single time, not one. Can you imagine? How could I even be the person to be in a relationship for that long and not ever be validated? Literally everything was, you're crazy. I don't know what you're talking about. I never said that. You're being too much. You shouldn't even think that way. You shouldn't even think that way. That's your problem. Like, all the things. It was just not a good relationship. And I think just because I thought that like I was standing up for myself. But I remember going to my friends and being like, am I crazy? Can I just tell you what he said? Can you tell you what you did? Am I crazy? Am I being dramatic? And I remember this whole time in this relationship, like, he cheated on me and would always have girls in his phone and shit like that. And I would find it. And of course, and we would fight about it. And I just remember being like, I know that I'm not crazy. I know that this is not too much to ask. I know that I deserve this. But the minute I talk to him, I'm going to lose it. That I'm going to lose that belief, right? So I'm going to lose that belief. So what I realized at the time was like, I only really believed myself 1% of the time. And the rest of the time, I thought I was crazy or whatever. I was believing the things that he would tell me, because that's what happens in an emotionally, abusive relationship. So what I started to do was I started to leave myself letters. I wrote myself letters in that moment. If I found like some chick on his phone or something like that, I would write myself a note and I was like, this is what happened. This is what I found. This is what he said in the past. No matter what happens when you bring this to him, just know these things. Like I literally would write myself letters in the future because I knew future me was going to not trust myself and was going to go with what he was saying or go back on my word. And so I wrote myself these letters, and ultimately through like a mix of that and just starting to take better care of myself, I was able to leave. After 13 years being in it was just so unhealthy. It's almost like I used to wish one day I could wake up as a different person, and one day I did. I woke up as a different person. So just through this act of validation, I started standing up for myself more. Obviously, this meant that we fought more, but at the same time, I just was like, it honestly doesn't matter. I know he's never going to change. Like I just knew this just isn't it because I'm not seen and heard. And I just started to trust and believe myself more. After this happening for 13 years, one day, he left his phone. I think he went to play basketball. He left his phone. And I don't know, when someone's cheating on you, you know how to get into people's phones. I just checked and I saw he had been messaging somebody for a year. And we were married already at this point. So this was the other difference, was we were together for 10 years and I thought it would stop when we got married. And then this was after we got married and I saw it. And I think because I had been practicing trusting myself and all the things and writing myself those letters and being like, no, Mariela, you're not crazy. This is what's happened. This is not too much to ask. The next time it happened, I was able to leave like that day, which is wild. But I became a different person through this, which is why rebuilding self-trust actually shifts your identity. It means that you actually can be a different person. Like you can wake up and be a different person. So anything you're struggling with now, doubt, self-doubt, imposter syndrome, comparison, people-pleasing, you can change that. You can change that. This process I now call belief bookmarking. Belief bookmarking can make you a new person. It did for me multiple times. It got me out of a toxic, emotionally abusive marriage. That was 13 years. And since I've used it to reinvent myself many times in my own business, where I literally am like, I can become anyone I want. If there's something about me that I want to change that I know doesn't serve me, I know that I can collect evidence and remind myself in the moment that I trust myself so that I can expand that window from 1% of self-trust to 5% to 10% to 20% to 50% to trusting myself most of the time. And that's where I am now. So it took this system for me to be able to get out of that and leave that day, literally file for divorce. And from then on, I became obsessed with just how much more could I trust myself, right? From leaving that 13-year relationship, I started to task myself with trusting myself even more. That turned into moving to San Diego, even though I didn't really know anyone, quitting my 6-figure job to travel Europe solo for a year. Then it turned into meeting my daughter's father and moving to London. Then it turned into, I'm going to start a tech company. And so I did that. I was a co-founder of a dating app, a tech company for a couple of years. And I learned so much. And that was a huge risk. And then I had to trust myself with probably one of the biggest things I've ever had to trust myself with, which was to get divorced again while I was pregnant with Pi and move all the way from London back to California to start over because I knew that I was going to be okay. And I couldn't have done that. So many people have told me that what happened, it would have made sense if I tried to make it work. And I get emotional thinking about it because I'm like, no, it's because I trust myself. I knew that this wasn't where I was supposed to be. I knew it wasn't good for me and for us. And I knew I was going to be okay because I had practiced self-trust in so many other ways in my life that I was able to say, okay, I'm going to leave this job. I'm going to leave this house, this life, this marriage, and I'm going to move in with my parents and start all over and raise this baby by myself. This is what self-trust has allowed me to do. And I know that was the best thing for her and for me. But I'm so proud because I started from literally not trusting myself at all and trusting everyone else but myself. And I created a life based on that, right? And so now I'm in the ultimate situation of having to trust myself, which is I have a business and the income from the business is like what sustains me and her. And I'm the person who has to make all the decisions and I have to take really big risks in my business all the time. And I'm the person that has to like really just have my own back no matter what, because so much of business is really just trusting yourself and your decisions. And there were just so many moments that I had to trust myself since then, that once I made the decision, it's like it stacks and it stacks, and things that used to feel hard feel easy. So once I trusted myself with the decision to, I'm going to raise Pi by myself and move in with my parents, I knew that this was just the best thing for her and for me and all of that. Then I trusted myself with, okay, am I going to stay in the workforce? And then I trusted myself with, oh, I think I'm going to work for myself, and I don't know how. But I remember telling myself, I'm not going to make it to the 5-year anniversary of my job. I still had the same job from when I was in London. So when I was in London, I was a marketing director for a recruitment agency. And when I moved back, they let me keep that job part-time. So I was still the director of marketing, but I just did it part-time. So thankfully, I was able to rebuild with that job. But I remember thinking, am I going to now look for a job in America at a tech company, or what am I going to do? So I remember in 2019, I had 3 jobs lined up, one at Uber, one at Facebook, and one at Google. And I got to final stages, and I got offered a job that was like $250,000. And I said no. And I knew that in that moment, me saying no, this is so much self-trust, you guys. Like, I'm just telling you my whole self-trust story. It was so much self-trust because I knew that like me saying no to that wasn't just saying no to the offer. It was saying no to like the workforce, and that I was going to work for myself, even though I didn't know how. So I said no. And from that point on, I just started looking for, what can I do? What can this business be? Through that, I found coaching. That coaching like existed in all the different forms that it exists in. I was like, this is it. I'm not going to make it to the 5-year anniversary of my job. I know that I'm going to quit. So this was like a year before, almost like a little less than a year before I left. I told myself, I put it in the calendar, and I trusted myself. And I was like, you're not going to make it to your 5-year anniversary. You're going to quit before. We don't know how, but we're going to figure it out. So then, because I made that decision, I started just anchoring into, what is this going to look like decision wise? So then I just started making decisions to be like, how can I put myself in entrepreneurial circles? How can I meet as many people as possible doing this? How can I start to build my personal brand? How can I start to build my thought leadership? How can I start to build an audience around this so that I can figure out how I'm going to monetize it later? I don't really know what it's going to look like. I trusted myself through every investment. And then I trusted myself to, once I landed my first few clients, that I was going to quit my job after the 3rd client. And I told myself, when you land the 3rd client, if you land 3 clients in 2 months, you're going to quit your job. Because if you can land 3 clients in 2 months, you can land 30. This is just the self-trust that I had built up until that time, because of all the things I just shared with you, right? It didn't just happen overnight. Again, why I'm such a great teacher of self-trust. And I did. The day that I landed my 3rd client, March 2020, I emailed HR and I handed in my notice. And then 2 days later, they laid everybody off because it was the pandemic. So I would have lost my job. The one thing that had remained the same from my life in London and being married to being a single parent living in my parents' house, the one constant was that job. I would have lost it had I not trusted myself to start that business. And had I not handed in my notice, it would have felt like that decision was taken from me. That is my story. That is my self-trust story. So you know more about me as Mariela, as my story, and me as a coach, what you can expect from me, why I am the person that has been able to change so many first gen and women of color's lives, because I understand it. I've walked through the most difficult circumstances, and that's what's made me a better coach. And that's what's made me create concepts and approaches that nobody else has, because I created them for me. So now to tell you, what does this look like for me in 2021? So obviously I quit my job, like I said, in 2020. I grew this business. I literally made 6 figures my first year, which is insane. And then my second year, it dipped. I felt like I lost my success. Granted, my first year of business, like I made 6 figures, but I also moved out of my parents' house. I moved to Oregon, to Portland with my daughter, because cost of living was lower. And I was like, I need to get out of my parents' house. So combined with just being alone and depressed and all the things and isolated, I really just lost my self-trust. In 2021, my income dropped by like almost half. I felt like I had lost my success, but it's really because I lost my self-trust that year. And what I learned is that your success can never be lost. Your success can never be lost. Only your self-trust and your relationship with yourself can be lost. And that can be safety. It can be lots of things, but you can never lose your success or your ability to make money. You can only ever become more capable of making money. You can only ever become more capable of navigating disappointment. You can only ever become more capable of serving clients. Your expertise gets better. Everything about you gets better and better and better every single day that you show up to life and that you show up to your business. The only thing that you really can ever lose is access to yourself. That's the thing you lose. So if you feel like you had success, you lost it, or you've done this, like you still have that. The most important job and the most important skill is to refine and keep strengthening your relationship with yourself. Your relationship with yourself is going to carry you through everything. So 2021, like I said, my income dropped. I was really in my head about things that I used to be doing, I stopped doing. I felt like I couldn't do it anymore, like it wasn't working. I just felt less confident. I felt less safe being visible. I had a really clingy energy on sales calls. My sales call rate, close rate, like dropped from maybe like 60% to 20. I just wasn't landing sales calls. I just remember being like, my life is so hard. I'm a single parent. Nobody understands like how hard my life is. Like it's so hard. And I'm not going to be able to make this work. I'm not going to be able to pay for rent and daycare. And at the time, it was like the pandemic. So there weren't like a bunch of jobs like out there, but I just started reaching out to people and being like, hey, I'm looking for something part-time. I just had to let go of the shame. And just through that, being like, okay, Mariela, what if you did have to get a job? What's the big deal? If you had to get a job, who's going to shame you, right? Just through the act of me saying, I'm willing to get a job if I have to. I'm willing to work part-time. I'm willing to freaking DoorDash. Whatever I got to do, I'll do it. That allowed me to release so much shame that I then was able to be like, okay, what do you want to do? So what I did that year was I signed up for a mastermind in the depths of like my money scarcity. And through that mastermind, I was able to just be coached back to trust myself again. And that changed everything for me. I released shame. I was able to be coached back to, like I said, trust myself again. And I will tell you how I did it, but this is the year that I made $80K in the last 2 months of the year after making $70K the first 10 months. And that $70K in 10 months was like less trajectory wise than I had been making previously. So it was still a big dip. And in looking back, I've obviously had to audit and assess like what happened was I regained self-trust in 3 areas. Number 1, I gained trust in the way that I was marketing. So before that year, I was doubting, like, am I a life coach? Am I a leadership coach? Am I a business coach? Am I a coach for first gen? Like I was really just, and how am I supposed to market this way? Am I supposed to lead with a result? I'm not really leading with a result. I was just super in my head about stuff. And then I just was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just going to show up and help people. Forget about the title. I'm all those titles. And what I started to do, this is how my self-trust regained in my marketing, was I just started to make my gifts public. So I really thought about it. So a concept that I actually teach my clients, and I'm going to be teaching you in this series, is making your gifts public. So my gifts were speaking. People would say, I love hearing you speak. I love the stories that you tell. I love your story about XYZ. So I was like, okay, why don't I just sell in my stories and just go back to storytelling instead of trying to educate and teach people stuff? So I leaned into my gift of speaking. I leaned into my gift of storytelling. I leaned into my gift of creating client results. Like I had really strong client results. I wasn't talking about them. I started to just make my marketing be storytelling, talking about my clients, right? So that was my marketing channels, right? Like, that's what I did. The second area that I rebuilt my trust was in my expertise. So I just started to doubt, am I a good coach? Am I good at what I do? And what helped me do that was belief bookmarking, which is what I talked to you about of how I got out of the unhealthy marriage. Was back then I used to write myself letters, but what I started to do instead was I started to leave myself voice memos. So when I got off of coaching calls and it was such a good call and the client had a breakthrough and I was like, oh my gosh, I left myself a voice note that I've listened to countless times to this day called "You Are a Good Ass Coach." And I recounted a call that I just got off and I was so proud of myself. And it was a very complex situation. It was someone who I was her business coach, but they were in a relationship where they were anxiously attached. Their partner was avoidant. That back and forth tug of war situation was causing her to not be able to focus on her business. So I literally relationship coached her, business coached her, and then she launched her company and she still has it. And it's oh my gosh, it's an apparel company. I just left myself this voice note. And then I started to just do that all the time. I started to anchor into belief bookmarking. So what happened was, even though my circumstances hadn't changed, my belief went up. And that in itself, the sales calls started to come in and I started to close every single one. It also helped that I was in a mastermind because masterminds create safety and community. So that helped as well. But I started to just land more sales calls and every single person was like, yes. So it was like a sales call, 3 more sales calls, 4 more sales calls. And then it was just like, oh my gosh, like it's a 25K month. Oh my gosh, now it's a 20K week. Like it just was like insane during that time. And I just raised my belief and started doing more of making my gifts public. The third area is I rebuilt my trust in my own like thought leadership. So I think I was trying to like blend in or whatever at the time. I don't know. I was just like, no one's really talking about this. Do people really care about first gen? And does this even make sense? And like healing in your business, like do people even care about this? At that point, I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to go back to what I actually believed in. I let my marketing become more polarizing, more rebellious, more honest. I talked about all the things I was shaming myself about. Like I talked about having ADHD and how I felt super unorganized and I don't time block and I don't like batch my content and I feel super like it's hard to run a business and be a single parent. I just remember being like, this is what I believe. And I think that in itself helped me stand out and people just like really felt that. And I remember one post that I talked about where I said, I don't batch my content and I'm done trying to fit into boxes, something else about that. 3 different people quoted that carousel post. And that essentially was like $24,000 worth of sales. One post, 3 different people quoted it. And that's really where my thought leadership became more clear. I really realized women of color and first gen need to be coached differently. Why? Because I'm sitting in all these struggles and I'm comparing myself. And I was like, no, I'm a single parent. I have ADHD. I'm a first gen daughter of immigrants. Like I'm noticing all these patterns that are coming up. This is what's happened to me this year where I feel like I lost my self-trust. Here's how I regained it back. I think I really realized like, what do I need that's different? And maybe other people need this thing that's different too. So that was a huge thing. I regained my trust in the way that I was marketing. I regained my trust in my expertise and my belief in my expertise. And I regained my belief and my trust in my own thought leadership. So that is how I was able to, like I said, hit 80K in 2 months. And then the entire next year, it was like, I hit 327 that following year and just being booked out, being able to raise my prices, all the things. But I didn't change my offers. I didn't add new offers. I didn't change my offers. It was just my belief in my self-trust that allowed me to do that. This is what this has looked like for clients. I'm going to close with this. My client, Mariana, was able to hit her 2024 goal in May. And her 2024 goal was to make 30% more than she did in 2023. And she hit that. And it was all mostly from new customers. My client, Patty, made twice what she made last year by May in organizational contracts. My client, Betty, hit her biggest quarter in 3 years this Q1. All of these all these clients are in reclamation. Lorraine doubled her income last year. Michelle doubled her income in the last 6 months of last year, which is when she joined reclamation compared to the first half. And then she hit that number already this year or close to it. Danny was also more than able to double her rate as a coach because her areas were more in expertise. So we realized that like she had all this expertise that she wasn't tapping into. And so we elevated her offer and elevated the client that she was selling to. So she was able to double her rate and then sell at that rate. So any one of these areas, marketing, expertise, or thought leadership, any of those on its own can create the doubling and the collapsing of the timelines, which is what my clients have experienced. Sometimes it can feel like magic, but it really is just that when you are able to trust yourself and you can access yourself, you actually have the highest level thoughts about yourself, the highest level beliefs about yourself. And that is what helps create demand because you are marketing unlike anybody else. You're really giving yourself credit for all the expertise that you have. You're really able to tap into and own your thought leadership and not be caught up in comparison because that's where you lose your magic. So in the next episode of the podcast, I am going to talk about how you can prepare to double your demand with self-trust. The 3 different areas around marketing, expertise, and thought leadership. We're going to talk about that in the next episode. So I hope this was helpful. Please, please, please opt in to join me in the challenge. It's on my website. You can opt in. It's 3 ways to double your demand using self-trust as a strategy. And I am going to be coaching live in Telegram. All the details are all in there. And we're going to have like a workshop, all the things. It's so exciting. So I'm excited to see you there, and I will see you on next week's episode, which is part 3 of the 6-figure self-trust series.
Now, what if I told you that there is one skill that will make or break any business strategy, regardless of what program you're in, what coach you're working with, or what your income is? And that is the leadership skill of self-trust. Self-trust powers your first 100K to $250,000, regardless, like I said, of what your business model is, regardless of strategy. I've seen it. I have experienced it. I have coached on it. I've seen my clients create the results from this alone, integrated into business strategies. And I will share more about that. So self-trust affects three main areas of business. Number one, it affects your marketing. You second guess your marketing because you think it needs to look a certain way. Oftentimes you stop doing what's working. Number two, belief in your expertise. When you don't trust your expertise, you tend to underprice. You're not giving yourself credit for all of the transferable skills that you are bringing into your offer. Number three, just thought leadership. You start to water it down because you don't see anyone else doing what you're doing, saying what you're saying, and that requires self-trust. When you water that down, it affects demand, it affects pricing, it affects your mindset. By resolving just one of these areas, this is how my clients have hit their income goals in half the time without changing anything else in their business. You don't have time to change everything in your business. If you could clean up just one of these areas, that alone has created these results in my client's business and in my business. And that's why I'm offering a level of coaching I have never offered to the public before. And that is the 6-figure self-trust leadership series. In this exclusive series, I'm going to help you integrate self-trust into your actual business strategies, affecting your marketing, affecting your mindset and your belief around your expertise, and affecting your thought leadership. So by opting into the series, which you can do by visiting my website, marieladelamora.com, and also visiting my link in bio, you're going to be able to access all the parts of the series. So one is a podcast series on cycle breakers and money makers, where I'm going to be talking about self-trust as a strategy, the most common areas that lack of self-trust affects business results and demand. So you're going to want to tune into that. Number two, and this is private, and you have to opt in order to get this, is access to a private Telegram broadcast channel where I'm going to be dropping voice notes on these same topics. I'm also going to be choosing questions in that channel to respond to via voice note and offer coaching. Number three, a workshop is coming July 17th, 3 ways to double your demand using self-trust as a strategy. So tune in. You're going to want to opt in, get access to all of this. I've never offered this level of coaching before. And stay tuned as well, because only for those who opt into the series, the doors to reclamation are going to reopen briefly for those who still want to join the July cohort. You're not going to want to miss this.